It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is what made the cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Trajan Wealth brings you this portion of the program as well. When it comes to retirement, Trajan Wealth, Trajan Wealth.com. That's TrajanWealth.com for all your trusted local needs in retirement. Joining us on the program right now, he's our Ute insider for KSLSports.com. By the way, JJ out today, Sly in with me. We're at the Kenny J's barbecue here at the District. And a lot of Ute talk because Kenny's a big Utah guy. Now he'll make you barbecue. The barbecue is non-denominational. You know what I mean? Like you can come down. Everybody from all walks of life can enjoy it. Utes and Cougars alike can love on the Kenny J's. However, Bartle's here with us. Steve,
does Bartle dabble in the barbecue?
Steve, I hate to rub it in, but the brisket is on point, brother, and you're not here.
You travel a lot, Steve. I know you've taken your trips to a couple.
Some good barbecue joints.
Yeah.
That's the thing I'm looking forward to most of the Big 12 Media Days, is getting out to Terry Flack's and a couple other barbecue spots. And oh yeah, dude, I'll have to hit up this spot up out in the District. That should
it's
sounds
good.
Pretty good.
Yeah,
listen,
you can't miss it. Follow the smells.
I'm a Texan by nature, and I approve, and it's phenomenal. But yeah, Steve, guess what? We're gonna be in Frisco next week, all enjoying the Big 12 Media Days. We were just talking about Utah. And every year for the last 10 years, it's been like, now this is the group who's going to have a 1,000-yard receiver. I haven't heard much of the wide receiver room just because we've talked so much about Devin Dampier and his dual threat nature, and then the running back room, of course, too, that got also affected by some transfers out of New Mexico. And Jason Beck obviously has that lineage of putting the ball in the air. He knows exactly who he has in Devin Dampier, and I think a lot of people are starting to realize that this guy's really, really good. Add an All-American, a dual set of All-American potential tackle or offensive lineman on this team, and you've got yourself quite the deal. But I don't know. Tell me who could be a potential 1,000-yard wide receiver in this group this year.
Yeah, I think that's the question everybody has because this group is so new.
Yeah.
Alex, I want to go back to something you just said. People are starting to realize that Devin Dampier is good at football. Like, people are starting to catch on.
It helps
that's wild.
It helps to have the O-line, I think, that he does, because what he did at New Mexico was with a New Mexico offensive line.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, put together a quarterback ranking, and I'd love to see it. I'd love to see where people have Devin Dampier now as they're starting to catch on. But it's interesting with Utah's receiver group. Like, obviously, there's so many new faces, right? And I think that's kind of the big mystery of this roster is, who is actually going to emerge as the go-to pass catcher, right? Who's going to be the guy on 3rd and long that, you need a first down, you need somebody to get open. Who's going to be that guy, right? Who's going to be that go-to receiver? And, we don't know right now. There's not a clear answer. They've brought in a number of guys, especially in this most recent spring portal window where they've brought in Tobias Merriweather and Larry Simmons to hopefully be those guys. But, they weren't here for spring, so we don't know, where they're at. And I think that's going to be the big key throughout fall camp is, figuring out what you have in those two specifically, because I think those are the guys, that Utah brought in to hopefully be that, right? Because we talked all spring long about, needing, a player to emerge in that receiver room. And, by the end, it was Zacharias Williams. But what does Williams do? He hits the portal himself and ends up at USC. And so, I think Utah went after Merriweather because he has a lot of the qualities that you look for in a wide receiver one type. He's 6'5", he's 200 pounds, has the speed, has the fluidity. He's just been nicked and injured throughout his 3 years so far. It hasn't been able to put it together, but I think that's what you're betting on. You're betting on a Larry Simmons who had a nice season at Southern Miss last year at 450 yards or thereabouts. You're hoping he can come in and, with his experience, he started out in the SEC at Ole Miss, and you're hoping that he can come in and potentially be that guy. So, we've got a lot to learn about this wide receiver room, and frankly, it might end up being a tight end like a Hunter Andrews that might emerge. It was only a couple years ago where Dalton Kincaid ended up, I think, 50, 60 yards short of 1,000 yards. So, and Hunter Andrews looked dynamic throughout spring ball. So, there's going to be a lot to figure out with that wide receiver room. But I think if you had to ask me who to put the best odds on, I'd put it on the two guys that they brought in, in that spring portal window, and Tobias Merriweather and Larry Simmons to emerge as those guys.
Yeah, I got a few questions. Surprisingly.
Here we go.
So I mean. For me, what type of offense is this? A type of offense that could command a 1,000-yard receiver, right? Is that something where maybe Zacharias Williams saw that and maybe that's not what he envisioned as it going to? Is us passing? Is Dampier's impactfulness and dynamic ability with his legs going to take away from potential receivers? I just, from things that I've seen, I think we could spread the ball around. I think from the tight end position to the outside position, is this the type of offense? We're talking about Tobias Merriweather, 6'5". We also had a guy in Damian Alford last year who was a senior and put up great numbers at Syracuse, and his only statistic was an interception that he threw. With that being the case, I know we got a new OC, but is this Jason Beck offense the type of offense to command a 1,000-yard receiver? Do we actually need that in order to win?
I don't think that the offense needs it to win, but it has the potential to create one, and I think that's the key. Jason Beck, he's only been an offensive coordinator by title at New Mexico. He did it at Syracuse and on kind of like an interim basis. And then, but he really played a big role at Virginia with the quarterbacks there during those 2020, 2022, when he was there, and played a big role in Brendan Armstrong's production where he threw for over 4,000 yards. So, he played a big role in terms of the game planning and putting together the offense and helping all of that out. So I do think the offense has the potential to produce that. But I think with what Utah has, where their strengths are at, you don't want to have to force it, and you don't need it to be successful. This offense, is going to be geared towards the run, but they are going to take shots. They're going to push the ball down the field. That's something that's been super evident with Dampier, and watching film from last year, at New Mexico's. They want to take shots down the field pretty regularly. And so you need those pass catchers if you want to run the ball as much as Utah does, and with the running backs that they have and with the offensive line that they do, you need those to take advantage of those opportunities down the field as the defense creeps up, and you need to create space, you need to capitalize. So yeah, it's going to create opportunity, and I think that's going to be kind of the big draw for receivers right now in terms of recruiting receivers to Utah. This is going to be a run-first attack, but it's going to open up opportunities down the field, and it's just going to be on the receivers and the quarterback to capitalize on those.
When obviously when they came in and the offensive kind of gets changed over, Jim Harding on that offensive line, like that's a guy who's a staple, obviously, in Kyle Whittingham's coaching pedigree, and of course, I love it. We got. Are there any brisket burgers in there? Oh yeah, you got 12 of them.
12.
That's a good move.
You getting ready? I see you.
Yeah, that's the move I'm going to make. I was looking.
Don't subtly say that.
That's the move I want to make. No, I was looking at recruiting classes, and not that they matter, because like as soon as it really gets down to it, like this is, these are. It's an interesting time to try to get recruits these days, but the way that the recruiting works in 2025 is very different and difficult, to manage. However, it also, Steve, gives an opportunity that you have teams. Utah's always punched above their weight when it comes to recruiting. the NIL situation, I think people look at it and they go, okay, what's the future look like? When it comes to raising money, obviously they talked about being able to bring in as much, they're going to spend the full $20.5 million, like they said they were going to. But at the same time, how has NIL affected the recruiting process? Because it's a real factor, and it's just one of those hard things to be able to really kind of put a number on.
Well, yeah, I think NIL it's changed the game, and it's leveled the playing field across the country, where you're seeing programs like BYU, who just a few years ago had a hard time cracking the top 50 in terms of the team rankings. Now they're landing 4- and 5-star kids, and largely due to NIL. And it's not just BYU. Like, you look at it, and it's just sort of you look at the team rankings and what sort of classes look like right now, and you're seeing a greater diversity of where these top prospects are ending up, right? It used to be that Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State hoarded all of the 5- and 4-star talent, but now you're seeing a 5-star commit to BYU. You're seeing, a 4-star, a couple of 4-star offensive tackles commit to Utah. You see, 5-star cornerbacks commit to Colorado. And even Houston, they currently have a 5-star quarterback in their class right now. So,
dude, like Kansas churns out big names right now. Texas Tech has a ton of money they're throwing at guys. These are people who actually weren't competing nearly as much, but now with the NIL space, they do much better.
Right, exactly. And so it's sort of leveled the playing field just across the board, where that's been something interesting for programs to navigate. And I think you're starting to see it now, with the revenue sharing and all that, where it's I think programs have a better idea of how to navigate NIL and money conversations and all that, where I just think like this is, I think a lot of programs are just starting to figure out and find their footing in this new world of recruiting with NIL and revenue sharing.
How has that new recruiting window, transfer portal window, that adjustment to this whole dynamic of new recruiting been for Utah? Bringing guys in, as you said, we've had 4-star, 5-star offensive linemen come in and be actual looks here that we've never seen. Every single year it seems like we're getting better and better. We're having the recruit that we've never had, from Clark Phillips to Lander Barton. We're just increasing these. How has Utah adjusted to this new recruiting window that they have had to endure?
Yeah, I think they've adjusted really well, and they've done a really good job of utilizing the portal in particular over the last couple of years, where they've added a couple key pieces where maybe they weren't the big names, but they came in to play a specific role. A guy that comes to mind is Gabe Reed a couple years ago, where he was productive at Stanford, but he comes to Utah and he's used as a designated pass rusher. Another guy on that same team, Mahmoud Diabate, was kind of a cast-off linebacker. He comes here and is able to focus entirely on football, and he has turns out to have a great season with Utah here. So they've done a good job of finding key pieces. And, this year was interesting coming off a 5-7 season. They lost a couple pieces, on both sides of the ball that they would have loved to hang on to and that, but they responded well. Looking at the spring portal window specifically, two young cornerbacks that I think there was optimism around, and if they stuck around, that they could turn into potential dudes for them in that secondary in Kwamari Shemwell and Sammy Hunter. But they both elected to hit the portal. What does Utah do? They go into the portal. They bring in J.C. Hart, who's a 6'2", 195-pound cornerback from Auburn, 4'3", 4'4" speed, has a lot of qualities that they like in terms of arm length and play style. They added another cornerback, Jalen Moson, who was an all-conference, all-SoCon cornerback at Furman. And so they feel like they've upgraded, actually, at that cornerback spot. So, the portal window has Obviously, it can drive a lot of people crazy because of just how volatile roster construction and retention can be. But I think Utah has still learned how to maximize its potential in terms of bringing guys in and guys that can help them, right away.
Steve Bartle, he's our Ute insider for KSLSports.com, and he, of course, has all things Utah dialed in. Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano are obviously Spencer Fano's a returning All-American. Caleb Lomu's getting a lot of preseason All-American looks. Give me a couple names on defense that aren't getting that type of respect that frankly could be in that conversation of being potential All-Americans this year.
Yeah, I think the two guys that come to mind first, Smith Snowden. He really came on strong towards the end of the season with some of the plays that he made, and this offseason has been big for him. He's taken every opportunity, every advantage this offseason to get in work, and he's coming in with the sort of mindset that I think speaks to All-American potential. So I look at Smith Snowden as a guy that he's about his business, and I think he's going to be fantastic this year. And then a couple other guys on this defense side of the ball. I think Teo Johnson, when you have a 5-7 season and you struggle, a lot of good things can fly under the radar. And I thought Teo Johnson was a real positive presence in that defensive secondary at that free safety spot. And making that transition in year one, it can be difficult because you're in a new position. You're seeing the game from a different point of view than he had been playing nickel, and that can bring some learning curve, some adjusting. And I think as he goes into his second year in that position, he's also added some weight to help him out with the physicality of it all. I think he's poised to make a good leap. And he played actually really sound football last year. I think he was one of the top safeties, not only in the Big 12, but in the country in terms of his, PFF grade and that sort of thing. And I think he can take a good step forward. And then the last one, obviously, is Leonard Barton. And, last year, coming back from his foot injury that he suffered the year before, he spent all off season, still kind of rehabbing that. This year, there's been none of that. He's been able to focus solely on football, and I think that'll be so good for him to have this offseason where it's been all football, to get back to the Leonard Barton that we saw prior to his injury in 2023 when he's coming into his own. As a linebacker, I think he can get back to form and put together a really solid senior season.
I was glad you brought up Lander because I think that's a guy who underperformed last year, or at least according to others, weren't meeting the expectations that have been really high for him, and he's always performed. Last year you could look at it and go, "Well, he didn't have the year that he wanted," and he still is one of the best athletes on any field that he steps on. And so that's a guy that I think that Utah fans should never forget about. That's the bona fide leader on your defense, and. Look, if they want to get their 21st year in a row of another pick six, he'll probably be a part of that.
My guy is Logan Fano this year.
You want to see that edge production
but that's when Utah's at its best.
Yeah.
Right? When they have that pass rusher to put pressure on the quarterback to get the ball out quicker. The DBs are making plays. Linebackers are playing downhill.
You got that pressure. That's when Landon Barton gets his sexy pick sixes, man.
Yes. It is. When you got the quarterback worried even before the pressure gets there, that's where the linebackers where I love to be. I loved when Paul Soliai, Kelly Tolivo was right in front of me, creating that max pressure up the middle and just making Eric Weddle and I's job just really easy. And so that's where things are great, and you have great defensive ends like Cole Messi, Paul Kruger from my day. And I think Logan's going to have that type of double-digit sack year because I think it comes easy for him. His agility off the edge and to bend around the corner is just elite, and I think he's going to really come into his own this year.
Yeah, no, just to follow up real quick on that slide, he's in that same boat as Lander where he was coming off a significant injury, and you could tell last year that he was playing it safe and playing to sort of protect, that knee. And this offseason, it's been all football for him. And if you remember, prior to his injury back in 2023, he was on a similar pace as Jonah Ellis. And Jonah Ellis ended that year with 14 sacks, I think 40, 50-something pressures. And so,
only 8 games.
Gets back to form. That's what's wild. So I think that's a great, shout out to Logan Fano, who also got married yesterday. So shout out for that as well. But I think that's a great pick.
He's going to be razor focused now that he's focused on his family, Sly. He's very mature now. I love it. All right, Steve, we'll see you in Texas, brother. Let's hang out next week at the Star, and we'll get some jamming going on the food side of things and on the football side of things, man. We'll chat with you then.
Oh my God!
All right, entertainment purposes only, Alex. Entertainment purposes only.
Yeah, the food too. The food too, by the way. Yeah. There you go. Steve, thanks, man. We appreciate it. All right,
we're here, Kenny.